Okay, welcome back. Just when you probably thought that most all the important books about the JFK assassination had been published, along comes Barr McClellan with his blockbuster. Published by Hanover House, just out recently. He is one of the busiest men in America right now, making media appearances. The book is Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. Let me just read from the inside of the dust jacket to all of you who don't know anything about this book. The plot to assassinate President John Kennedy has been shrouded in secrecy and deceit, leading most Americans to doubt the veracity of the Warren Commission's findings. Now, after 40 years, Barr McClellan exposes the secret, high-level conspiracy in Texas that led to Kennedy's death and LBJ's succession as president. Utilizing court documents, insider interviews, and even the findings of the Warren Commission itself, Barr McClellan reveals the complex maneuvers, the payoffs, and the power plays that changed the history of the 20th century. If absolute power corrupts, then blood, money, and deception are its allies. This powerful book represents the very best of the investigative field of journalism, with independent corroboration of all key points, and is compelling, convincing, and historically very significant. Welcome to the program, Barr.
Well, glad to be with you. Thank you.
You are a guy in the limelight. How many programs you been doing?
Well, it's been 2 a day, 3 today.
Sounds like football drills. 2 a days.
2 a days, right. Picked up TV Denmark today, and they pick up all of Europe, so may cover the continent yet. Now
you represented President Lyndon Johnson and his interests from 1966 through 1971. What kind of a guy was he?
He was ruthless, unwilling to compromise. He had to have his way.
Kind of like a nasty, brutish child?
Really nasty, brutish child, a juvenile delinquent when he was a kid anyway, and he never really outgrew it. It's funny how when you get started, it stays with you. But he was mean. Now, it's not what you saw in public. He looked like a man willing to compromise, give anything to get anything. But behind the scenes, and he was mean, and that's what I can bring out. I can show you how he operated.
We have recently posted on my website again that very famous photo called the wink by some during the swearing-in ceremony on Air Force One.
You have the wink, huh?
Yeah, we've got it. You're familiar with that?
Yeah, I put it in my book, too, because it really is not that well known, but it sure says a lot. Just a one wink, and right there at the height of his being sworn in, he's got Jackie standing beside him, and she's still recovering. I mean, she's still in shock.
She's utterly in grief. I mean, my God.
Grief. And
the man turns over his right shoulder, and you can't see LBJ's face, but you can sure see the wrinkle marks on the side of his cheeks. He's smiling a bit.
He's happy, and Lady Bird is standing beside him, and she's grinning. And it was a very sad moment. It should have been a very sad moment, but for him, it was a very happy moment.
Well, that's who LBJ was.
Now, this one time he blew his cover after the assassination, knew about it going in, and he was supposed to show that remorse that was appropriate for the occasion, and he lost that cover at that moment.
Too much of a high for him. He couldn't hold it down.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, Barr, tell us the story, how you came to this decision to write the book, and then we'll fill in some of the spaces.
Sure. I had gone on with Ed Clark, who was the power broker, the boss of Texas, all during the 40s, 50s, into the 60s. Joined his law firm in 1966 and started hearing rumors to the effect that Clark had been behind the assassination.
Right away?
Right away. I mean, that first year. And I really didn't believe him. It just, couldn't be. In 1973, I was partner and working with Don Thomas, who was the other key partner in the firm and was business attorney for Johnson.
Well, you climbed the ladder fast.
Well, I was doing pretty good. I did have a couple of real good cases, and I made them some money. That's the kind of thing you look at, of course.
They like that.
And did some things for Johnson off and on. It was our pro bono work. We helped the president however we could. stopping parades, supporting elections, just doing whatever it took to make sure Austin, Texas stayed with him.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I found out about it for sure from Don Thomas. Learned even more when we did a cover for him on getting some psychiatric work after he came home from the White House in 1969. He went into deep psychiatric treatment.
For?
Very depressed, paranoia really brought it on. It was a paranoia that developed shortly after the assassination and was noted by some of John Kennedy's men who stayed in the White House for a while. My quick explanation for it is he knew he could kill to become president, and he was worried someone else might. But it stayed with him. We worked on that. Plus, Ed Clark, again, the boss of Texas, asked me to help him get a bonus well. It was some high-level negotiating that was going on for him to get a bonus for the assassination. I didn't realize it at the time. It only came apparent to me several years later.
This is after he left the White House.
Yes. Johnson had come home.
Mm-hmm.
Clark had figured he would be in for 8 years.
Yeah, he decided not to run. For those of you who don't know, he announced he would not be a candidate again. And was this just as a sidebar stemming from that paranoia, do you think? Did that put him over the edge? Or was he told not to run again?
Well, the whole thing put him over the edge. The paranoia just extended to everything. He was afraid of the military.
Mm-hmm.
He was afraid of the media. He was afraid of everything.
Mm.
And he really became non-functioning, even while he was in the White House. And
Really?
like I say, that all combined to lead him out. He was a broken man when he came back to Austin in 1969.
Wow.
So I'm picking up all this while I'm working with him, and I really come to believe it, I guess, about the time I leave the firm. They asked me to do something that I just flat refused to do.
We don't want to talk about that.
Oh, it was fine. They wanted me to represent a client where I'd been representing clients on the opposite side all across the state, and I told them I couldn't accept that conflict. They brought it to me 3 times, and I flat said no.
Uh-huh.
That's when they go in and ask Clark what to do, and he says, well, if Jaworski wants it, we give him anything he wants, which was another tie-in to the cover-up of the assassination, I later found out. And I thought, though, this was all covered by the attorney-client privilege. That privilege is very broad. It says that an attorney can't tell anything about what his clients know unless necessary to prevent immediate injury. So it's very broad.
Yeah.
And I figured I had to live by it, but I got into litigation with my partners after I left, my former partners. And in 1984, knowing they were taking the system and just working it every way they could against me, I just flat put what I knew in an affidavit. Of course, it was filed with the DA and a bunch of judges across the state, but nothing was done then because Clark had control of the Texas justice system, what we call Bubba Justice. He had started this back in the late 1940s when he put a judge on the bench with the agreement with the judge that the judge would rule for Clark in any close case. And, of course, any case can be a close case. The judge would also agree to take any call from Clark when he wanted to talk to him, and that limited a judge's freedom a good bit, too. In return, he got payments, and he could win at poker. His children would be taken care of. His friends would be taken care of. It was a very nice arrangement. It worked very well. It worked throughout the state because it was in Austin, and all your litigation involving state matters went through the state capitol.
All of it.
He had a stranglehold on the state.
Amazing.
It really was. And a lot of people just can't believe it, but it's Bubba Justice at its worst.
Well, you stuck your neck out by filing that affidavit. You were brave. Some people would say maybe silly, but you were brave to do that.
Well, I had all I could from those guys. I knew what they were doing. I'd seen how it was done. I said, that's it. No more. Let's go, fellas. We'll fight out in the open now.
Wow.
Finally, it took until 1994. It was 13 years of litigating, and everything went out. His bank failed. The one I was fighting primarily, the FDIC, took over, and there was nothing else to do. So in 1992, I was talking to an agent, and he asked me if I had anything controversial, and I suggested this book, and he, of course, bought it immediately. We went to work getting the research done because I had left everything when I left the law firm, and had to get the exhibits together and all. That took 5 years.
How hard was that?
It was hard because getting information from the government is next to impossible.
Especially a government like that.
Oh, yeah. They knew what was involved here. A lot of it came out of the Kennedy archives, and it just took time and like pulling hen's teeth. Anyway, in 1998, we had it all together, and I took one of the toughest steps I had to take in this whole process. And it brings home something about this whole Kennedy assassination, that we're dealing with real people in the real world, and people's lives are going to be impacted by what I was putting together. Anyway, we had the whole case together, and I had to let the Kennedy family know. And I wrote the letter to Ted Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, sort of as the patriarch, just to tell him that these findings were going to be made public, and I wanted him to know first. I didn't expect an answer. They don't respond, until later something did happen there. But it was a courtesy. You just have to do that. Again, you were dealing with the real world.
Sure.
And after that, we started on the book itself. It took 5 more years to go through the writing, the editing, the re-editing, the fact-checking, the final approvals. It just takes time to get a book out nowadays.
Wow, that's a long time, though, Barr. That's
it was.
Well over 10 years. Stand by. We'll pause here and then come right back with more. Lots of questions. The book is Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. Hanover House. Bookstores everywhere. Talking with Barr McClellan, a sensational book, well over 10 years in creation. Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. This is a story of a state so corrupt it almost defies description. And I don't suppose things have changed much since then, Barr, but we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later in the interview.
Okay.
So you notified the Kennedy family. The one question that I've pondered over the years, as have many, many millions of others, is at what point did the Kennedy family realize that LBJ was involved? Do you have any read on that?
I do. There are a couple that have, over the years, the first one really came through Jackie Kennedy. She commissioned a book through France by James Hepburn, Farewell America, and it pretty well concluded there was a conspiracy involving big oil. I say pretty well because she couldn't be sure. They just didn't have access to the kind of evidence that I could bring out.
Right.
More recently, again, we're back dealing with the real world and real people. We did get a call from a nephew of Kennedy's saying that what's in the book about the events in Dealey Plaza, at the Parkland Hospital, and then at the airport, at the airplane, Air Force One, are accurate. So it's really the first breakthrough I know for the Kennedy family coming through.
Mm-hmm.
They've been real quiet about it. Of course, it was a massive tragedy for them. There's just no explaining the horror, the loss that Bobby Kennedy, for example, suffered. The big question is, why didn't he do more? He was hamstrung. J. Edgar Hoover, who just happened to be a neighbor of Lyndon Johnson's, cut off any communication, even though Bobby Kennedy then was Attorney General. And Bobby was supposed to reveal everything once he gained the presidency. He made that announcement while he was campaigning, and of course he too was killed.
That cost him?
Yep, that cost him.
Mm-hmm.
But the family has really suffered so much, and if they could somehow get some peace of mind on this, it would be good.
I think your book goes a long way to helping that happen. The murder of John Kennedy Jr., and that's how we refer to that around here, came as a shock to the nation. But I was surprised at how quickly that seemed to have been filed away by most people. How do you see that plane crash?
I really, Jeff, couldn't say anything about that. Not in the sense that I can say anything definitive about it. I just don't know enough.
Does it bothers you? The circumstances.
No, it does. It does. The Robert Kennedy murder is a real.
The murder of John Kennedy Jr., and that's how we refer to that around here, came as a shock to the nation. But I was surprised at how quickly that seemed to have been filed away by most people. How do you see that plane crash?
I really, Jeff, couldn't say anything about that. Not in the sense that I can say anything definitive about it. I just don't know enough.
Does it bothers you? The circumstances?
No, it does. It does. The Robert Kennedy murder is a real problem. A real problem.
It sure is. Anybody who studies that objectively and honestly can't help but come away with a lot of concern.
Well, it's one tradition that ran with Lyndon Johnson. He was one of the few presidents that had the record he had of people dying while he was in office, and not just president, but Senate, House. He left a trail.
So he had a death list too.
Oh, he had a death list, and two of them are in the book because they're well established. I was really reluctant to bring in too many what people would consider rumors. I wanted to be able to show what had happened, but there were two murders, and they're in the book. That are well documented. The first one was right after he was elected to the Senate. You probably heard about the 1948 election where he stole the election.
Mm-hmm.
I was able, through my partner Don Thomas, to tell what happened there. And Don Thomas was the missing man, that was down in this little town in South Texas, stuffing the ballot box with dead people, the names of dead people.
Yeah.
Anyway, I brought Lyndon in, and that raised a real scandal. Everybody knew what had happened, and everybody in the state was getting ready to run against him. So right after that, he couldn't have any scandal come up, but one developed because his sister, Josepha, got involved in a sex circle in Austin, Texas. She was running around with this fellow named Doug Kinzer, and he was trying to get money from the government. Lyndon Johnson was just starting the SBA then.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been a real problem for Johnson. And Clark, working with Mac Wallace, who was married to another woman involved in this circle, was called upon to kill Doug Kinzer. He did. He walked into his office at a little pitch and putt golf course there in Austin, shot him 4 times, killed him. Didn't flee, really. He kind of lingered around. He had to be arrested because if the murder was unsolved, there'd be too much digging going on.
Got it.
Anyway, he's tried. The jury recommends they split. Now, they want to give him the death penalty or a life sentence. One of Clark's bought judges, though, takes the case over and gives him a 5-year sentence and then suspends it. So Wallace walks out.
Oh.
That was the first that we know.
Yeah.
Again, 10 years later, June 3, 1961, Wallace shoots and kills Henry Marshall. Well, that one in the Texas judicial system gets ruled a suicide. But 12 years later, with a Texas Ranger after the case, just keeping after him, that grand jury verdict is changed to murder,
mm-hmm.
and the indictment says that we can't indict the people because they're dead, but they would have been Lyndon Johnson, Mac Wallace, and Cliff Carter,
wow.
a close friend.
Yeah.
So you had it there. You have this man with a trail of murders that's documented. There are rumors about more, but like I said, I tried to keep the book really focused, corroborated evidence, and carried on up to the assassination itself.
I just got my copy today and wasn't able to read much of it, but what I did read was the documentation is stunning. I mean, it's all there.
It really is. I tried to do that with the key documents so that you don't even have to believe a word I'm telling you. You can look at these documents. And what we were able to do was make a fingerprint match to this Mac Wallace who killed these other 2 men.
Oh, you got the fingerprints in the book. I saw that.
The fingerprints are there. They put his fingerprints on the sniper's nest on the 6th floor there in Dallas. So we made our case. We had, like I say, 68 total exhibits in the book, but that one nails it down.
All right, we'll come back and we'll pause for a couple minutes and we'll talk about that fingerprint and how that does lock it up. What a corrupt and horrible state government system. And it again, one wonders if it's changed any. And that death list issue, we saw the Clinton death list, and now there's a talk about a Bush death list, and it seems that suicides and accidents have become a kind of a new means of taking care of business in this country, maybe more so than ever. Be back in just a couple minutes with Barr McClellan. The book is Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. Okay, we are back. A very great honor to have Barr McClellan on the program tonight, coast to coast on the Talk Radio Network. Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. Let's talk about the mechanics of the murder, the assassination of our president, and the fingerprint. And then we'll talk about maybe some of the main tentacles connected to the operation, Big Oil, and some people talk about the Rothschilds, the money. Some people talk about Cuba and Castro, and there are a lot of rumors around, but let's see how you read that. But first, the mechanics of the actual assassination.
Yeah, the actual assassination pretty well played out with the crime scene itself. What I was able to do was fit the key players that we knew were involved. Mac Wallace on the 6th floor with Lee Harvey Oswald.
With him?
With him. Oswald was a patsy, just like he said he was. And Wallace was there because that fingerprint identification places him on that same floor. We know there was another man on the 6th floor. He fired one of the shots. There also was a man over on the grassy knoll, and this is evidence that came out by the House Special Committee that investigated the assassination after the Warren Commission concluded there was a conspiracy and that there was a shooter on the grassy knoll. We have not been able to identify that person with the kind of certainty that we have with Mac Wallace, putting him on the 6th floor. But he was there, and he fired the fatal shot. Where we pin this all down is how did they get away? And we know Oswald got down from the 6th floor to the 2nd floor. Wallace went down first, and he had a helper there who was dressed as suited in a suit, and they got together and were out the back door of the depository, where a police officer stopped them. And they told him they were Secret Service, and that meant no further questions from the police officer. He went on. Those two men were the assassin Mac Wallace and his cover, who was there to protect him while he was on the 6th floor.
What was Oswald doing?
He realized what had happened right after the shooting. Wallace had already taken off. He knew he had to get away during that initial shock. And Oswald saw what had happened. He tried to get away, too. He knew he'd been had and didn't make it. Ultimately, later during the day, he gets caught.
Do we think that he saw the actual shooting? He was right there? Okay.
He was there.
All right.
And
you think the fatal, excuse me, Barbara, you think the fatal shot, the headshot, did come from the book depository?
No, it came from the
front.
From the grassy knoll. Actually, there's a stockade fence that extends there towards the Triple Underpass, and that's where this fellow we've called Junior was located. Okay, so
obviously, I mean, you look at the Zapruder film, and these people still talk about he was shot from the book depository, and his head went the wrong direction. They try to ballistically prove that feasible, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the fatal shot came from the front.
It came from the front, and everybody that looks at it knows that. The American people, 80% of us know there was a conspiracy, and
sure,
we know the shot came from the front. But what they did, they found another Secret Service guy back over behind the pergola right after the shooting. A police officer stopped the guy, says, "I'm Secret Service." That was Junior, this fellow we have not named yet. We have our suspects, but we don't have the proof to put him there.
Lansdale involved?
Who?
The guy named Lansdale?
No,
military.
We haven't ruled out anyone yet, but we're really looking at three others.
You think you got it pretty close, though?
We got it real close, and the interesting thing is a couple of them are still around, so it's not like everybody's gotten off scot-free.
Okay, so the shot from the book depository did go through the neck.
That was from the neck.
The upper back, yeah.
And an entirely separate shot hit Connolly. So this business of one magic bullet going through all that flesh and blood and coming out in...
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Forget it.
Okay, now, we got two shots from the book depository. One hits JFK, one hits Connolly.
Right, and the third one there from the front. There apparently was a fourth shot. We can't rule that out yet. This really ties to Oswald's rifle, where there were three empty shells found by the sniper's nest.
Mm-hmm.
We can account for those as a miss, and there seems to be pretty good agreement that the first shot was a miss. He got excited. He fired too soon. The plan didn't go off perfectly. They had to have the cover up, and of course the other part of the plan that didn't work. Oswald was supposed to die in a blaze of glory. Instead, he gets away, and he has to be killed, and that's where Ruby steps in. Amazing thing is, following Oswald after he gets away, he didn't take his pistol with him, so he went back to the boarding house to get it. As soon as he sees a police officer, he shoots him. That's Officer Tippett. They chase him to the Texas Theater where he's arrested, trying to shoot it out again.
Right.
And they got their suspect. Of course, he says he's a patsy. He realizes what had happened. He was a patsy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say he wasn't even there, but if he wasn't there, it's an easy thing to say something else. I'm innocent. Instead, he says he's a patsy, which halfway, putting him there already.
Yeah, it does. All right. Again, the name, just for the record, in case anybody missed it, the name of the man who shot from the book depository.
Mac Wallace.
Same guy we talked about earlier. And we got a fingerprint. And tell us about the fingerprint.
We got the fingerprint. This was, when I started my research, I knew Clark and Johnson were involved in it. I just had to find the proof. And I figured, well, maybe the Warren Commission overlooked something. I found the fingerprints. They overlooked about 26 prints. And we took those prints, got the print card from Mac Wallace when he murdered Doug Kinzer, and asked this really noted latent print examiner, Nathan Darby. He had helped the Philippines set up their system. He'd helped Kodak develop its fingerprint identification system. He was a top-notch expert. We gave it to him blind because people get so emotional about this assassination they can't see straight. Gave it to him blind. He made the match. Then we told him what was involved, and it didn't stop him. He stood by his guns, gave us the affidavit, and that's when we got hold of the Kennedy family, let them know what was going on, and took what we had to the authorities, Dallas Police Department, and the Assassination Records Review Board. This was in May of 1998.
All right. A lot of questions, but real quickly. So Wallace murders Kinzer, walks into the miniature golf course, blows him away, stands around, gets arrested, gets off with a 5-year suspended sentence, goes on to murder. He shot JFK, not the fatal shot, but he certainly shot him, shot Governor Conley, sets Lee Harvey Oswald up. What a story. And you got the fingerprints to prove it.
And we got the prints to put the icing on the cake. We got a lot of other written documents.
I'm sure. Well, the book is just loaded, as I say. Warren, in a word or two, the Warren Commission, incompetent or set up from the beginning to whitewash?
It was pretty well set up from the beginning to whitewash. I don't know so much intentionally as they just were going to make sure nothing went further than Lee Harvey Oswald. They were almost afraid to go any further.
I would think. All right. Well, I know how cheap life can be when you push the wrong buttons.
Well, when you got power.
That's right. Be right back with Barr McClellan in just a minute. Just trying to get a quick thumbnail sketch of this phenomenal book, Blood, Money, and Power, How LBJ Killed JFK. Barr McClellan, the author, and my guest. All right, let's pull back and have you trace, if you will, the tentacles of power that came together to orchestrate this. It wasn't just a single level. I'm sure there was much more to it, but let's hear it from you.
Sure, it was, and it was multi-level. The problem really arose for Johnson in 1961 with the Henry Marshall murder. It was really plotted during the inaugural week, so Kennedy's being inaugurated. He's got a real problem, and he calls on Ed Clark to help him. He gives Clark the Secret Service manual for the protection of the president to see the game plan. Clark is the one who enlists support. It's a very subtle thing, but he wants people to know that some big changes are going to be made, and he needs to know that they'll be okay if Kennedy's gone. This includes some people with big oil, some people with heavy-duty construction, some people with big interest in the military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got his team together, but he knows he can't, and he's not going to tell everybody what's going on. He keeps the conspirators, the crime, Mac Wallace group, very quiet. They're very small. But he does have this support that he knows he's going to have after the assassination, which becomes critical. He's got to have a perfect cover for this.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the plan didn't go perfectly. Oswald is still hanging around. He's got to be dead. So Murchison is brought in, Clinton Murchison, the multi-millionaire in Texas who becomes a billionaire during the 60s. And he brings organized crime there in the Dallas area into the scene probably through what's known as the Red Man's Club in Dallas, and they get Ruby to do the job, and he does.
How did they order, simply tell Ruby you're going to do this, or did they pay him off? How did they get that to happen?
Well, it was one of those mixes of things where Ruby owed him something. Ruby wanted to help out. It was a mix, and it worked. He was one of several, but he was the one that did the job. And, of course, they take a lie detector test. This is just the incredible thing, how this cover-up works. But Earl Warren himself sits there and watches during the polygraph exam. It comes out that Ruby is lying, and everybody says he's okay. He dies not long after.
Cancer accidental, or more to it than that?
A very quick-acting cancer, very strange, but covered up.
Okay.
Of course, the key to it was his lawyer was Joe Tonnahill, who just happened to be a real close friend of Ed Clark's and was named in there to keep the lid on Ruby. And we have a letter in there from Leon Jaworski with notes on it by Ed Clark telling Tonnahill to keep Ruby quiet. Well, he does. So the cover-up, I mean, it extends here all this time. You asked about the Warren Commission, were they in there to cover it? They were. And you see that in several ways, too. So this assassination, particularly once it's happened, everyone unites behind Johnson, who's responsible for it, and they're bound to have suspicions. I mean, in any criminal investigation, you look at the man who gained the most, who had the biggest motive, and it was Johnson. And J. Edgar Hoover comes in and assures them all that there was just one shooter. I mean, it's almost complete. The Warren Commission itself, one of the members comes in and says, we're not a banana republic. Well, they didn't want to think, that the military or somebody would go in and knock off the president to take over like a banana republic would. But who even suggested we were? I mean, who needed to deny something that nobody,
Yeah, it's pretty funny. People don't think, though. They don't watch the progression of things like that, and they can't look behind. They just don't get it. They
don't.
Watching the front hand while the back hand is robbing them blind.
It is, and it's just power at its worst, and how you can take it and abuse it and get away with assassination.
Impunity. Coup d'etat for the military-industrial complex, is that an overstatement?
That would be, because it really came down to Johnson, but it involved all these people. Yeah, so you can't say the military-industrial complex wasn't involved, and they were certainly supportive once it was over.
And the mob, and everybody.
Yes, they all came together.
Multiple reasons, I guess. Really, there were a number of reasons to remove John Kennedy, not just one or two. There were a lot of aggrieved parties out there.
They were a lot. They were, and I hate to say this, but they were glad to see him gone. They helped in the cover-up for sure. So it did have tentacles. It reached way out, and it really became apparent during the period after the assassination. I mean, it started at Parkland Hospital and just kept on going.
The body altered. We pretty well know that.
It's pretty well. I can't say for sure. I really haven't looked into it, but my experts that I worked with are convinced that there was some altering and probably a second body. Some of that is just amazing how they tried to raise that shot from behind, move it up on his back. But I mean,
good try.
Can't do that.
No, physics gets in the way. Just extraordinary. The aftermath of all this is that no one was really brought to justice. It was almost a perfect crime. And I guess to this day, most of those people are dead and gone. Nellie Conley had some interesting remarks a week or two ago. We had those. I'm sure you saw those as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is amazing, and it was almost a perfect crime. I think what made it not so perfect was the American people as a whole really saw through the whole scene in Dallas that day. They knew it was not, a lone nut, and I hope that what I can bring out will really blow that lid completely.
Can we retire the Fidel Castro Florida mob angle, or is that still a small tendril in this thing?
No, I don't see it as being a part, except that the military-industrial complex had every reason to support the assassination. And again, like I say, particularly after the fact.
Well, look at the Vietnam ramp up and the money made there and so forth. And
oh yeah, it fit right in with Johnson. Of course, Johnson becomes so paranoid that he's afraid of everything, and it becomes easy to convince a paranoid guy to go to war.
Who was running him? Who was directly running the guy?
Well, there would have been several, really. I mean, he had a number that he relied on, but when it really came down to it, it was Ed Clark.
Ed Clark.
Ed Clark was the man. He wrote a letter saying, "I am not indebted to anyone else more than you, and I hold no one in higher esteem." No. The only man he trusted. It was the only man he trusted.
Wow. I think I always like to roll the tape backwards a little bit and remember Eisenhower's, I guess it was maybe it was his final speech, wherein he warned America about this very mechanism.
Indeed, he did, and it makes it interesting from this standpoint with Johnson. He worked real closely with Brown and Root, who were deep into the military-industrial complex, plus Big Oil, and a lot of people don't know this. Big Oil had so much money, and they put it into the military-industrial complex there in the Dallas area. And you see this through investments in fighter aircraft there,
the TFX. Well, the Johnson Space Center, NASA,
It's all there.
It's all there.
And it's in Texas, most of it.
All right, let's roll the tape. Fast forward and take the Bush family and overlay it on the corrupt Texas power structure.
Well, in their defense, I've got to say this: that one reason Johnson and Clark could get away with murder in Texas was it was not a two-party state. They ran it as a one-party and really a very small-party state. Did about what they wanted. George Bush was one of the first to really take a leadership with a Republican Party in Texas. And, of course, he brought it to what it is today. It's a Republican state. So,
is it as corrupt as it was under Clark?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think, but there's some other reasons. The media has become a lot stronger, and I say a two-party states there. It's a lot harder to get away with what Clark could get away with. So I can't fault the Bush family for what they did in Texas to bring it out of the dark ages, really.
We still have an awful lot of power in that state. Huge amount of power. Even if it's somewhat fragmented from what it used to be.
I think it is, and especially on the national level. There is so much media coverage, and for all the fussing people do about the media, they really do a good job in keeping up with things and bringing it out.
As good a job as their masters will let them do. Now, we got to be honest here, and you know, Barr, as well as anybody, that a few corporations run most of the media in this country.
I know that, and I found that out the way I put it as a writer. I have no rights. I'm subject to what my publisher wants. I think we all have that problem. Who has the money, calls all the shots.
Sure.
But yeah, that's right, and it's a serious problem. We have run into that in trying to get this book out to the American public.
Yeah. Where
some of the major media have turned us down.
I'm surprised you did it.
I'm surprised they've turned us down, too.
Yeah. I think your comment is one that we need to keep in mind always. Dear listeners, when there is anything of a catastrophic or geopolitically substantial nature that happens suddenly, quickly, you have to immediately ask the question, who benefits the most?
Exactly.
And
it's the key all the time.
Follow the money comes right behind that.
And that's one thing we do have in the book. For the first time, we've got the money trail in there, and it is vital to the whole scheme.
At some point in the future, do you expect any of the Kennedy family to come forward? And I don't mean endorse you or the book necessarily, but to speak publicly about this issue, which they are more than aware of?
I would hope so. We are asking the Senate Judiciary Committee to request the Department of Justice and some of these other agencies that have withheld information to at least list what they have so that we can get it out. There are so many records out there that we've got to have, and the push is on in the book, and it's going to be presented in Washington next week to get this material out. We know it's there. We just have to see it, and I know it's going to show what I can tell you. It's going to show Johnson was behind it, and that's why it's so vital on the part of the government itself to keep it secret. I mean, these guys were all involved in it, and they've got to be flushed out.
I understand.
No paper is going to do it.
I am truly honored you've been here tonight. I salute you as a great American patriot, as a great human being, and you're a hero, Barr McClellan. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
The book is Blood, Money, and Power. It's absolutely a stunning book, How LBJ Killed JFK. Barr McClellan, Hanover House is the publisher, and we'll be back.